The morning sun cast long shadows across the bustling streets of the city, a place known for its vibrant culture and iconic landmarks. It was just another Tuesday for Peter, a hard-working man whose thoughts were always with his family back home. Every penny he saved was a small step towards a better future for them, a promise whispered across thousands of miles. He stood by the curb, his eyes scanning the endless stream of traffic, hoping to find a taxi. Taking a cab was a rare luxury, a small expense he justified today because he was running late for his job at a busy restaurant, and he couldn't afford to lose a single hour's wage. His mind was a calculator, constantly weighing costs against benefits. Finally, a black saloon car with a simple magnetic taxi sign on its roof pulled over. Peter breathed a sigh of relief. The driver, a man with a friendly, reassuring smile, nodded towards the back seat. To Peter's surprise, another passenger was already inside, a well-dressed man who looked like a fellow professional on his way to an important meeting. The driver explained he was heading in the same direction and offered a shared fare, which would cut the cost for both of them. For Peter, this was a stroke of luck. It meant he could get to work on time and still save a little money. It seemed like a perfect solution, a small kindness in a big city. Peter slid into the back seat, offering a polite hello to the other passenger, who introduced himself as David. They exchanged pleasantries about the morning traffic and the weather, the kind of simple, harmless conversation that strangers often share to fill the silence. David seemed genuine, complaining about an upcoming presentation and the pressures of his job. Peter felt a sense of camaraderie with him. They were just two ordinary people trying to make their way in the world. The driver joined in occasionally, his friendly chatter making the journey feel safe and comfortable. The car moved smoothly through the city and Peter began to relax, his earlier stress about being late slowly melting away. As they settled into the ride, the atmosphere was one of quiet companionship. Peter glanced out of the window, watching the familiar cityscape rush past, his mind drifting back to his family. He thought about his children and the school fees he needed to send next month. Every decision, no matter how small, was guided by this singular purpose. Sharing this taxi felt like a responsible choice, a sensible way to manage his limited funds. He had no reason to suspect that this ordinary journey was about to take a dark and sinister turn, or that the two friendly men sharing this small space with him were not what they appeared to be. The stage was set for a difficult lesson in trust and deception. The journey continued without event for several more minutes, the car navigating the labyrinthine city streets. Suddenly, David shifted in his seat and let out a small gasp of surprise. He reached down towards the floor, his hand fumbling under the seat where Peter was sitting. When he sat up again, his eyes were wide with disbelief. In his hand was a thick bundle of banknotes, neatly wrapped in a simple rubber band. It was a substantial amount of money, far more than anyone would casually misplace. Peter stared at it, his heart beginning to pound in his chest. A wave of shock and confusion washed over him as he tried to process what he was seeing. Where could such a large sum have come from? The driver, catching sight of the money in his rearview mirror, immediately pulled the car over to a quiet side street, away from the main flow of traffic. He turned around, his earlier friendly expression now replaced with one of greedy excitement. Well, what have we here?" he said, his voice a low whisper. David, holding the cash, looked from the driver to Peter, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. "This must be our lucky day," David exclaimed. "Someone must have dropped this. Finders keepers, right?" The air in the car grew thick with tension, a silent question hanging between the three men. The sight of the money was intoxicating, a powerful lure that clouded judgment. Peter, however, felt a prickle of unease. His first instinct was one of honesty. He was raised to believe that you should always do the right thing. He suggested they should hand the money into the nearest police station. It was someone's property after all, and they had probably lost it by accident. But the driver and David quickly dismissed his suggestion. "Are you mad?" the driver scoffed. "The police will just keep it for themselves. This is a gift from the universe. We should share it, the three of us. It's only fair. We all found it together." David nodded in enthusiastic agreement, already starting to count the notes. They painted a tempting picture of what that money could do. For Peter, it represented a solution to so many of his worries. School fees paid, debts cleared, a special gift for his wife. The two men worked on his conscience, persuading him that this was a victimless act, a simple case of good fortune. Against his better judgment, Peter felt his resolve beginning to crumble. The pressure in the small, confined space of the car was immense. Reluctantly, he found himself nodding along, agreeing to their dangerous proposal to split the money. He tried to ignore the knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach, telling himself that maybe, just this once, they were right. Just as the driver began to divide the bundle of cash into 3 equal piles on the passenger seat, a sharp, authoritative rap on the driver's side window shattered the tense atmosphere. Standing outside was a man dressed in a crisp, official-looking police uniform. He had a stern face and a commanding presence that immediately inspired fear. He gestured angrily for the driver to lower the window. "What is going on in here?" the officer demanded, his voice booming and accusatory. His eyes immediately fell on the piles of money laid out in plain sight. Peter's blood ran cold. The knot of anxiety in his stomach turned into a lump of pure terror. The officer ordered them all out of the car, his tone leaving no room for argument. He accused them of being thieves, claiming the money had been reported stolen from a passenger just an hour ago. His story was detailed and convincing. He described the victim and the exact amount of cash, matching the bundle they had found. "I should arrest all of you right now and take you to the station," he threatened, his hand resting menacingly on the handcuffs attached to his belt. "This is a serious crime. You will go to prison for a very long time." The threat of jail in a foreign country away from his family was Peter's worst nightmare come to life. David and the driver immediately began to play their parts, begging the officer for mercy. They pleaded, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the officer was unrelenting. He paced back and forth, his stern gaze shifting between the 3 of them, making each one feel the weight of his authority and the severity of their situation. He made it clear that their futures were in his hands. Peter stood frozen, his mind racing. He was trapped. He thought of his family, of the shame and devastation an arrest would bring upon them. The hope he had felt just a short while ago had evaporated, replaced by a desperate, suffocating fear. Finally, the officer offered them a way out, a corrupt bargain disguised as a lifeline. He said he was willing to look the other way, to forget he ever saw them, but his silence would come at a price. "If you want to walk away from this, you will have to make it worth my while," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You need to prove you are not common criminals. I will need to see what valuables you have, and you will have to pay a fine right here, right now, to settle this matter." It was a clear demand for a bribe, an escape route that felt both like a relief and a terrible violation. The driver and David acted quickly, feigning desperation. They immediately started emptying their pockets, handing over their wallets, watches and mobile phones to the fake officer. They urged Peter to do the same, telling him it was their only chance to avoid prison. "Don't be a fool, Peter," David hissed. "Just give him what he wants. It's better than going to jail." The pressure was immense, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to corner him. Overwhelmed by fear and confusion, and seeing the others comply without hesitation, Peter felt he had no other choice. His hands trembled as he took out his wallet, which contained the cash he had carefully saved for the month's rent. With a heavy heart, he handed over his money, his mobile phone, and the cheap watch he wore, which was a gift from his wife. The fake officer snatched the items, stuffing them into a bag along with the valuables from the other 2 men and the bundle of found money. He gave them one final stern warning to stay out of trouble before turning his back on them. The driver and David quickly scrambled back into the taxi. "Get in! Let's go before he changes his mind!" the driver shouted at Peter. But as Peter moved towards the car door, the engine roared to life. He watched in stunned silence as the taxi sped away down the street. The taxi didn't just drive away, it turned a corner and pulled over, just long enough for the fake police officer to jump into the passenger seat. Then it disappeared into the city's traffic, leaving Peter standing alone on the pavement, his pockets empty and his mind reeling. In that gut-wrenching moment, the entire elaborate deception came crashing down on him. The friendly co-passenger, the lucky find, the angry policeman, it was all a lie. They were a team of criminals, and he had been their target from the very beginning. The feeling of foolishness was as painful as the loss of his money. He had walked straight into their trap. The lesson Peter learned that day was a harsh and expensive one. It serves as a powerful warning to us all. In a world where things can seem too good to be true, they often are. Be cautious of strangers who seem overly friendly, and never get drawn into schemes involving found money or get-rich-quick proposals. Always trust your instincts. If a situation feels wrong, it probably is. When you get into a taxi, especially in an unfamiliar place, make sure it is from a reputable official company. Your safety is more valuable than any money you could ever find or save. What would you do in that situation? The best answer is to walk away and protect yourself.